Hey, it's time for Deploy on Friday for Friday, March 24th, 2023. Your host, John and Jim, are here. Jim down in Melbourne, John up in the Gold Coast. Jim, how are things?
Yeah, really good, man. How are you doing up there?
Good. It's hot again. I don't like the weather we have in Queensland. I'm hoping this humidity will die down at some point. Of course, everyone up in the northern hemisphere is like, "Come on, how bad could it
Yeah,
be?" And this
yeah,
is coming from a Canadian, but I'm like a snowman in a tropical area, so I'm suffering a little bit. But how are things with you?
yeah. Really great, really great. We had I think the weather's starting to turn down here and get a little bit colder, but exciting times. It's Ramadan is a big thing in our neighborhood, and that's just started tonight. So we're going to go out to some of the night markets and eat some fantastic food. I think.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a lot of work done this week, more perf updates, etc. Why don't we just get started? So, this is our blog. If you haven't seen it yet, this is at octopus.com/blog. And Steve Fenton has written an article entitled DevOps uses a maturity model, not, capability model, not a maturity model. And John can't talk today, so apologies for that. So, he talks a little bit about what is a maturity model versus what is a capability model. And Steve basically outlines the reason why DevOps uses a capability model, not a maturity model. Maturity models have been around for a long time, obviously, when we think about the evolution of systems and processes, but it does have some limitations, as Steve rightly points out. And when we think about DevOps, we want to think about what our capabilities are in terms of delivering software and what the values are. And he rightly draws out the fact that the capability model is aligned to the DORA metrics that are espoused by DORA, things like mean time to recovery, et cetera, deployment times, et cetera. So that's where your viewpoint on this has to differ. And so Steve does a great job of comparing the two. So that's an article that you can check out that he's gone ahead and written, and definitely worth a read and a discussion internally if you have folks who are debating this internally. So another article that we posted on our blog earlier was an Inside DevOps interview with Steven. Steven's a member of the team doing not at Octopus rather, but he's working for a customer that we have and doing a lot of stuff with Octopus. And yeah, he's had a lot of success. Yeah, really likes Octopus. So if you're at all curious about what it's like to have Octopus in a practical sense and how you use it and apply it, Stephen was kind enough to share with us his insights on that. So again, that's up on our blog. You can check that out. That's available up on our Inside DevOps blog. On to the news of some of the data we have. We have a Helm chart. Ta-da! So the team's been busy. Helm charts are a great way of installing things onto Kubernetes clusters. So they're kind of like they're a package manager. You can download these things, and what they do is they provide basically a templating mechanism. So inside of our Helm chart, you'll see that we have all these basic YAML files, and these are referenced in with variables, which you can see here, and some of which come with defaults from a template, and then others you can supply. And essentially what a Helm chart does is it provides this outline for provisioning applications onto Kubernetes clusters. And so we've now published one for deploying Octopus Deploy onto a Kubernetes cluster. So that's pretty awesome. You'll find us up on Docker Hub. So if you go to docker.com, hub.docker.com, and then you do a search for Octopus deploy -helm, you'll find our Helm chart there. So this is our Helm chart, and you'll be able to get the instructions on how to download and install this. This will use the Helm package manager for doing this. And you can see we have ours available up on the Docker registry. And so you run this command and you provide a values file, which is basically all your defaults that you want to provide. And you'll have Octopus running in your Kubernetes cluster. Are you gonna set this up on your what do they call it, Minikube, or your K3s cluster there, Jim?
I think there's a really high likelihood of me using this quite extensively, to be honest. There's
Okay,
yeah, we're playing a lot with clusters and Octopus and setting it all up right now. So yeah, it's going to be super
cool.
useful.
Yeah, so I like the fact that we published this. It makes it a lot easier for people to get this set up. There are some prerequisites just to be aware. So you do need a SQL Server database, and you can provision that through Docker if you want. You can have this running a lot of different ways. You can have it running on Azure. You can have it set up in your own instance, as long as there's a connection string that you can provision, and it will look something like this. And then you'll persist that inside of your database connection string. If you've ever run Octopus in a Docker container, there's a YAML file that goes along with that. It looks almost identical. This one will define all other parameters as well, such as egress, ingress, and other things. And we define those as part of the Helm chart template. So you can see here's our ingress settings, and some of these are defaults. You can change these over if you wish, and so this is the template file that we provide. There are other rules as well. So for example, I want to specify how I expose various volumes and how I leverage those, or if I'm curious of the service parameters like what ports, etc., etc. All these are provided through the Helm chart, and that's available up on GitHub and exposed through Docker Hub. I always like this. Coming soon. There you go.
Little tease.
Awesome. So your team's going to be utilizing this, I would imagine.
Yeah, without revealing too much, we're playing a lot with spinning up Octopus in various configurations at the moment. So using something like this as a base, I think, is going to be really helpful.
Yeah, hopefully customers will find value in that. Moving along, we have a lot of information that's hit the webs and the internets this week. So this is a product that was based on an acquisition that Grafana made called K6. So Grafana Cloud K6 is a cross-functional load and performance testing solution. We may have talked a little bit about this in the context of Azure in a previous show of Deploy on Friday, where Azure had performance and load testing capabilities as a SaaS product, and this is in a similar type of product. So Grafana Cloud K6 is a solution that allows you to do performance and load testing in the context of charts and graphs and all that great stuff outwardly. So that's awesome. And so they, in a blog post, talk a little bit about how to integrate this as part of, say, maybe a CI/CD process. And then once you have that, then provisioning an instance and sending data. So you can see how you get these nice charts and graphs. This is the typical Grafana experience you'll see when utilizing it for observability. This was an article by Richard Lander. Richard's actually a fellow compatriot from Canada, and he's part of the team at Microsoft, and he wrote this. He's written a lot of articles actually for the Microsoft blogs, and he's part of the .NET team. And so this is an article entitled "Secure Your .NET Cloud Apps with Rootless Linux Containers." So what they're talking about here is that in .NET 8, all of Microsoft's Linux container images will include a non-root user. Its name is app. So that's the Meet app. And so for all their Linux images, starting with .NET 8, will contain an app user. And this user will be able to run your app, but won't be able to delete or change any of the files that come with the container image, unless you allow that, of course. And so the reason why this is useful is, of course, obviously in context where you want to run with least privilege. And this is something that's been espoused by Ubuntu chiseled images. So the idea here is that these are images that are provisioned to run with least privilege. And so going forward in .NET 8, all of the Linux container images will now have this new app context and utilize that in the context of running those images, which is fantastic. Another switch they made was being able to standardize, of course, on 8080 for all container images, going forward. And this decision was based on their early experience with chiseled images, which already listened on port 8080. So 8080, the lesser known port, the real heavy lifting port, So yeah, 3000 or 8080. What's your favorite port? 1, 2, 3, 4?
I always had a bit of a soft spot for 5000, but that's the problem with favorite ports, right? Like, no likelihood of a clash here, yeah?
No, I don't think so, because I think the first 3000 are reserved, and then after that is just go for broke. You got up to 65,000 ports or something like that. So, so I like changes like this where they're pushing us. In some cases, they're dragging us, towards a better world, kicking and screaming maybe. But no, I think this is good. Defense in depth is always a good thing.
Simple changes, right? But really, really, really well thought out.
Yeah. And so as Richard indicates, a follow-up, and for those who are probably wondering, a follow-up post will discuss the best use of these images with Kubernetes. So there you go. Another .NET article I saw, Ben Watson writes about how the Bing team went from .NET 5 to .NET 7 and saw a huge amount of improvements there. This is probably expected. So there was an article written by Ben about 2 years ago talking about how they upgraded their central workflow engine, which they called Zap, from .NET 5 from the .NET framework to .NET 5, and he talked a little bit about the performance improvements that they saw with that change. And now, as they're incorporating AI and all this stuff, they need to make sure that they continue to have good throughput and low latency and great great telemetry and all that great stuff. So they've been one of the early adopters of .NET 6 and .NET 7, and now they're turning their sights to .NET 8. And so this is an article that goes into the benefits that they saw moving from framework to framework, version to version. And you can see some of the examples of what they saw relative to HTTP requests. So here you see the availability, which is always an important metric. What's with these charts? No one wants to blow these up. So there you go. Yep. And then .NET 6 JIT efficiency improved. So you can see, obviously, this is with their Zap-based search engine. So you can see the total load time and init time. And then as they migrated over, you can see a big drop in load and init time, which is always a good thing. I'm assuming this is milliseconds on the left.
Yeah.
And then moving to .NET 7, I think this is the GC, that sort of sawtooth pattern. Usually this is going up and to the right, but this is testing. We saw 24% average improvement in the amount of time to process spends in garbage collection, which isn't much to start with. In production, it was better, close to 30%. And then a large portion of this improvement comes from general CPU usage improvements in the runtime, which translates to lower overall CPU usage in queries in Bing. So an unrelated traffic shift. But you can see overall the trend here. So core time per workflow, usually around 2 seconds. So this is a typical search, I would imagine, with Bing. And then it goes down with .NET 7 to an average just above 2 seconds, which is nice.
I can smell an incident or something in the middle there.
That's right. Yeah, something happened there. Maybe that was AI. Who knows? A little hiccup, a little Skynet hiccup. Who knows? But if you're looking for evidence around what, if you're looking for evidence to talk to, say, your business person or your engineering manager, and you're saying to them, listen, we got to go to .NET 7 or we got to think about .NET 8, blah, blah, blah. This is good evidence to have on hand to show, hey, people are seeing great wins out of this. And I think this is the nice thing about the sort of cadence that you're seeing out of Microsoft these days, is that early and often releases help people feel kind of compelled to move to the latest and greatest because they're seeing these wins come out of that. So I think this is good, and we're already seeing a lot of traction around .NET 8 already. We're seeing previews, etc.
And Ben also spoke in the article about how it's getting easier each time to migrate. And so that's a really good reason to keep upgrading, and not to mention the fact that now that we're iterating more often, I think the actual support lifetime of some of these releases is actually going down a bit. It's gone are the days where you can write an app in .NET 4.5 full framework and let it sit there for 10, 15 years. I think.
Come on, you gotta have a little. It takes a while for it to marinate, so you gotta let it sit there. So. If you're at all curious, there's the .NET and .NET Core support policy up on Microsoft's page there. And you can see that the long-term support is for .NET 6. And so the release date was back in November 2021, and patch release of 2023, end of support 2024. And then .NET 7 is going to be more of a short-lived release. And then .NET 8, I believe, is going to be the next one that's going to come out. So this is important to note when making these migrations, but we're getting away from these very, very long sort of support cycles, I think, which I think is a good thing. And these early and often releases. So we're
as long as it's easy to upgrade. Yeah.
So long-term support .NET 6, you can see here, goes all the way to November 2024. And we are in the midst of .NET 7 greatness, and then we will soon be in the midst of .NET 8 greatness, and then .NET 9. So, definitely worth checking out there. I think this sort of visibility and transparency helps a lot because it allows you to prepare. There's no surprises. This is another article that came across the internets announcing Docker+Wasm. I think a friend of mine and I called it the WasmWagon. So, like a bandwagon when everyone jumps on their favorite team. We're calling this the WasmWagon. Everyone's jumping on Wasm. So Docker+Wasm is this idea that they basically integrated, Docker has integrated Wasm into its runtime. So you can now run Wasm-based containers with Docker. This is sort of similar to Kind, which is Kubernetes in Docker. This idea that I can spin up a single node cluster within Docker. And here, what they're doing is giving a similar capability, but doing it for a WASM-based container. And so if you're interested, you can read a little bit about this. They talk a little bit about RunWASI. I love these names. RunWASI is a multi-company effort to make a library in Rust that makes it easier to run containerd shims for WASM workloads. So last December, the RunWASI, tongue's going to get cramped here, project was donated and moved to the CNCF, containerd organization. And so this is great. And they expose some of this capability out through the desktop application. So you can see here, these are features in development. I actually have this installed on my machine, but I won't bore people with it. But you can expose these capabilities here. You can see there's Kubernetes right there. And then here you can see use containerd for pulling and storing images here. And I can start utilizing this. I use this on a Mac, so I have the Rosetta integration myself. I've got it on M2 Mac, and so this feature is also there as well. But you can fire this up using the CLI. Pretty easy to do. And then you point it at your WASM-based image, and this gives you the output of that. So I'm doing the hello world sort of example. And then you can obviously configure it using YAML, which is always a nice thing. We love YAML, right? And away you go. And here's kubectl, basically applying those changes to a cluster and then hitting that endpoint, which is based on that WASM container. So the WasmWagon, get on board, Jim. Everyone on board the WasmWagon.
Or it'll
It's
run
a really
you
bad
over.
name, but I'm going with it.
Yeah.
What do you think about WebAssembly? Any thoughts?
I know I'm struggling. I'm struggling to be up to speed on it, to be honest.
Oh, come on.
Like I mean, I get it. It sounds good in theory. Are people deploying stuff with it? Is it happening, or is it?
Yeah,
Are
it's
we
happening.
just developing with it? Yeah, it's happening.
Yeah, it's happening. So it is shipping in all the browsers. You can use it.
1.0.
I would argue that WebAssembly is more useful in the case of our context of a plugin model. So because you have this secure context, I think you're going to see a lot of stacks and platforms and apps and others take advantage of WebAssembly, but not for the front end. I think this front end support through browsers is not really the high order bit. I think what a lot of developers want out of this is a secure, safe and sane plugin context. So I can use this as a plugin host.
Yeah, I know Blazor's, on the WASM bandwagon, and it's definitely happening for the front end, but I haven't heard a lot on the back end side yet.
Yep. So this to me is the high order bit. This thing where you provide a sandbox inside your application, and then you talk to it via message passing, whatever that may be, and then you have a safe and sane context, and you can load, pretty much anything and allow it to do whatever you want, and it's still safe and sane to run. That is the high order bit for me, but that's another issue for another day. So there you go. So Docker+Wasm, if you're using Docker, you can start experimenting with this now. Do you have Docker installed on your machine?
I do. I run a lot of stuff in Docker. SQL
Yep.
Server, Seek. All a bunch of logging services, all that stuff. Yeah.
So if you take a look at, again, we'll go back to the hub here. And we take a look at what's up there from Octopus. So you can see we have quite a few images there. We have our server instance. We have Tentacle. We have worker tools.
Yeah.
Worker tools are a set of tools that you can install. You can actually, we have a bunch of different packages available up on our labs. So if you take a look at our labs, which is a sub-org or repo, we have worker tools for GCP, Flyway, Azure, GitLab. So if you're doing a workload that you are wanting to utilize the latest and greatest of, say, GCP tools, or let's say Terraform, like I want to run latest of Terraform, the CLI, we have these worker tool images that you can use, and you can download and install those. And so we have the repos available there. So coming back to Hub, that's what worker tools are. They're basically a way in which you can provision an environment via container and then get access to those things and then use them. It's really easy to use, and it's all part of the integrated process that you have within Octopus. There's our Helm chart there. It's our old CLI, Octo, et cetera, et cetera. So we have lots and lots of images available up on Docker Hub.
Yep. I use them all the time.
Yeah?
Yep. Reproducing customer, setups and all that sort of stuff. Yep.
So again, Docker+Wasm, peanut butter and chocolate. Curl has turned 25. We talked about this last month, and they've shipped a new version. It's kind of funny. There's nothing really major in this new version.
Yeah, I went to look for the change log. I'm like, oh.
But I mean, come on, I think you gotta feel for the maintainers, right? They've been shipping this thing for over 25 years, and so there's no major breaks in this, even though it's
Yep.
a major version. But they felt like it was worth celebrating, so they've shipped version 8. In this version, there are some fixes, obviously, but in version 8, no major changes, and they think that it's worth the notice. So happy birthday, Curl! I've been using you
Happy
for
birthday.
25 years. I've been in the
Yeah.
industry longer than that, but I appreciate you being along for the ride in my journey for sure. You've been in my tool belt for a
Yep.
long time, so happy birthday. This was an article by Ryan Dahl. Ryan is the creator of Node, and he's working on Deno, which is a secure runtime environment for JavaScript apps. And this was an article, I don't know if you remember, but a few months ago they shipped package.json support for Deno. It wasn't there originally, and a lot of JavaScript developers is like, where's my package.json? And so this is an article that Ryan wrote that talks a little bit about why they added support, because package.json, I think you might remember, it was actually a thing in .NET back in the day. And so they had support for this back in the day, but they removed it for some good reasons. But one of the reasons why it's a challenge is because package.json isn't necessarily the best representation of dependencies and scripts and all this stuff. So Ryan basically talks about how this is mostly focused on developer productivity, but also for some ease of transition from, say, vanilla JavaScript over to Deno, Node, etc., over to Deno. So, what are your thoughts on this?
So they have some other kind of package tracking mechanism that's not package.json that's got proper locking and package version locking and stuff. Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I don't know. So people just didn't like their cheese being moved when they're
That's
coming
right.
across, was it? Yeah,
I
fair
know.
enough.
I
I can
know.
get
Well,
that. Just want a soft landing. Yeah.
yes, I think that's the ideal way of describing it. And Ryan articulates this in simplifying and accelerating JavaScript development. So basically, moving cheese, shuffling deck chairs, whatever it may be. If a developer comes to
Mm,
your platform and their expectations aren't met, that's a problem. And then
yeah.
obviously, dependency management is always going to be a challenge. So that's something that obviously they want to be aware of. So this article goes into the details of why they added, and I always like these background ones because they explain the why,
Yeah.
not just the how.
I mean, I've got a lot of sympathy for newer JavaScript projects as well, right? Like the JavaScript ecosystem is just so mature, so full featured. I can't imagine trying to write a fully fledged framework and having to meet everyone's expectations as they were sort of coming across from
People do
wherever
it
they're
all the
coming from.
time. People do it all the time.
Uh,
Yeah.
well, maybe
It's
that's a
like,
problem.
yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. That is true. Anyways, worth checking out. Uh, we talked about this previously. So, roadmaps in projects was, I believe, a beta feature or a private beta, and now it's available for all. So, sorry, it was a public beta. Here we go. So, this is a public beta. We talked about this historically, and now it's available for you to use on your own projects. So, if you're looking to integrate a roadmap into your repo and you want to expose it to any of your visitors or followers for your repo, this is now available to you as a GitHub user, which is fantastic.
So it is a public facing one. It's not just for a team tracking their progress sort of thing.
That's right. So
Yeah.
this is available just by creating a new roadmap under the existing project by selecting roadmap in the view. Sticking with GitHub, Copilot, Copilot
Mm.
X. Da, 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 da. They've got a new logo.
Yeah.
So
This is huge, I think.
it is.
A
It
lot in
is. So
here.
there is, and if you're at all curious as to what this looks like at a more practical level, there's GitHubNext.com, and this is where some of those projects are listed. So Copilot for Docs, Copilot for pull requests, Copilot for CLI, Copilot Voice, etc. Copilot for everything. So this was a major announcement from GitHub, and they announced Copilot X, the AI-powered developer experience. The AI-powered developer experience. So they're utilizing
Capital
GPT-4.
V.
That's right. It's like the Ohio State University, not just the. So the AI powered developer experience. So based on GPT-4 is an evolution of the Codex model that they were using historically. And now they're bringing it to a variety of other things. So they're listing it as an expansion of where they provide those facilities. So a Chat GPT-like experience in your editor with Copilot Chat. So the idea is you can talk to this thing through a chat interface, and it will give you suggestions. Copilot for pull requests. Again, we can take a look at these at the next. So if we take a look at Copilot for pull requests, this is like where the next thing comes in. So pull requests that tell a story, automate automated testing. I love that. And then AI suggestions while you type. And so
You
you
liked
can check out
automations in your automation.
That's right. Yep. We heard you like automation, so we put automations in your
Yeah.
automations.
Yeah.
Cool. So you can now get suggestions for your PR descriptions. And there are markers in here that you can also add. So an example here is this is what you would typically use in GitHub flavored Markdown. And you can add these markers that say Copilot : and then it will give you a context like IntelliSense. So I can say, let's watch the video here. So now you don't have to write your PRs anymore. Fantastic.
Well, yeah. I don't know. This
You
is
should always
the one
check
thing.
them, of course.
This is the one thing that gave me a little bit of pause in this whole announcement. I think a lot of it sounds amazing, but PRs. Tell me why. Tell me how. Tell me what you didn't do. Tell me what else you considered.
It is. This PR improves this script by adding ID, order, and count features. These features help to avoid file name conflicts. Jim, are you really that worried?
How did Copilot generate that? Where did it get that from?
From the code diff. So it's part of a PR, and so it knows the PR, and because it says it fixes 74 as well, it will know what changes have occurred. So these are auto-generated by that hash there, and it says, okay, these are the changes that occurred, and then based on those, it will generate that description.
I have to admit that example is much better than I expected.
Awesome. He's a convert. I like it.
Yeah, maybe.
So there you go.
Maybe.
Yeah. So it goes into deep description about this. We could spend obviously an hour talking about this. So that's pull requests. Copilot for docs is if you're learning a new library or an API and you've been using it for years, you can feel like the documentation gets in your way more than it helps. What this does is it will read the API description and gen for you a doc so that you can see it alongside. I believe that's the case. And so this is another capability that's been announced.
You can maybe ask it questions as well, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Copilot for CLI. This one I thought was pretty cool. So the CLI itself is basically you can do a variety of commands against it. I don't know what it's saying. Yeah, I think there's a variety of commands that are listed there. But generally, there's lots of stuff. So Copilot for pull requests, for docs, for CLI, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all based on GPT-4. There's the CLI example. So a demo of the GitHub Copilot for CLI. So the idea is if you're using an encoder like FFmpeg, you can get an explanation of what that command does through the tool itself is supported. So lots and lots of stuff there in terms of Copilot. So exciting stuff, eh?
Yeah, the CLI one I was super excited about. I thought that was a great example. Like the amount of time it would take you to read the man pages and work out how to put a watermark on a video at the command line would be huge.
Yeah. So using this example of find. So there's the okay.
Find's one I can never remember the syntax for.
If there's one for JQ, I'll be like, okay, I'm done. Just tell me how much it is. I'm good. So you notice here it's piping them together, which is awesome. I can't stop this, but it says list JS files. So hold on. So that's the input. And it says, here's the command to run that. And then it gives you an explanation, which is awesome.
For revision as well.
Yep.
Yeah, this is cool. This is really cool.
I like it. Yep. Definitely anything that can help there, because God knows it's hard to figure out all the switches and slash commands and all that stuff. So that's a good thing, I think. So Copilot X, I will definitely either sign up for the preview or watch with anticipation for sure. I think that's
slowly worming their way into my wallet. That's for sure.
Come on, man. It's okay. It'll be good.
It'll be good. It is okay.
Sticking with GPT, ChatGPT plugins have just been announced. This recently just dropped. I have not had a chance to really read too much about this, but the ChatGPT model is now incorporating plugins from a variety of different vendors. So you can see ones here like Zapier, Wolfram Alpha, Speak, Expedia, Shop, Kayak, etc. And the idea is when you enable these things, it will allow it to participate as part of these requests. So here's an
Right.
example of requesting a reservation while at the same time breaking down the caloric breakdown of each meal that I wish to order from. And this is all being driven via
Oh,
GPT.
wow.
So yeah. So by incorporating these things as part of the model, you get more thorough answers based on the information that's available through those plugins. So an example, can you tell me what person/movie won the Oscar for these categories? And you can see it will link through to things like, browsing endpoints like CNN, etc. And that's exposed via a variety of up-to-date articles, etc. So this is using the browsing plugin demo. Sorry, the browsing plugin. This is something that GPT actually was a little bit hesitant on, the fact that the language model itself couldn't reach out and talk on the internet. But now I guess it can through this browsing plugin. So this is something that I
Oh,
think a lot of folks would probably be excited about, exposing this
Skynet's
capability.
coming.
Yep. So browsing. So there you go. It's all happening. It's all happening. So there you go. Chat GPT plugins. That's the latest thing I know. And I read this morning. So there you go. That's what we try and do here on Deploy on Friday. This is supposed to be a lighthearted show. I'm going to cry. Last but not least, I thought this was interesting. This came out. I remember seeing this a while back. This is about 11 years old, this gist. And I remember seeing this and I remember, oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about this. So when you do certain operations in your program, you have to understand that certain operations take more time than others. So an example might be something like if a code branch is mispredicted by the runtime, that can cost you, right, like five nanoseconds. Like, what's the big deal? What's a nanosecond, right? But what it really counts down to is how that compares to other things. Like if we compare that to, say, a disk seek, right? That's going to be about 10 milliseconds. And at this time, you're like, who cares? We're talking nano and milliseconds. Well, if you compare if you compare them on their own, yeah, it's not a big deal. But what really matters is how they compare to each other. And so this is a breakdown basically of typical operations you'll see in terms of latency and the reason why it says every programmer should know is because the decisions you make around where you store data, how many times you access data, do you have a chatty interface, are you going over the network, are you doing lots of reads or writes, etc. Those matter when it comes to your application performance. And to make this more qualified, what they did was they basically reset the notion of what an L1 cache reference, which is the quickest operation, and they reset it as, okay, let's imagine that's one heartbeat or 0.5 seconds long. Well, if you then compare that to the most expensive operation, which is to send a packet to California, between California and the Netherlands and back, that's 4.8 years if you use this as the base reference. So that tells you that hitting the network stack is going to kill you in terms of performance. And it just
Yeah.
boggles the mind where people who have grown up with the internet and just assume it's just ubiquitous and everywhere. I'm like, you can't go faster than the speed of light. And as a minimum, to go between Australia and the US, it's like 300 milliseconds. So it's going to be a
Yep.
minimum of 300 milliseconds to make a call back and forth, right? So this is the thing that I think and like it rightly identifies, this is something that every programmer should know.
Totally agree. And it was when I hit this part of the article, I went, "Oh yeah, this is the way you
Yeah,
explain
that's
it."
right. That's right.
I do like though in the minute category up there, they've got yawn and long yawn, two very
Yes.
standard units of measure.
Of course. And the espresso, the only people who drink
Yeah.
espressos rather, are using mutexes, I think. This is certainly not enough time for the chocolate syrup and latte sipping
No,
people.
no.
Yes. Brushing your teeth, 100 seconds. Well, maybe for some of us. I'm one of those speed brushers. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
One episode of a TV show, 50 minutes, including ad breaks. That's to compress 1 kilobyte of memory with Zippy. An SSD random read, 1.7 days by comparison. That's a normal weekend. Crazy. And
Mm,
then this one always makes me laugh. Like, I don't think people appreciate how long it takes to send packets. Like,
no.
you have to go through all 7 layers. Then you have to traverse the network, go through all the nodes. Then you have to hopefully, this is if there's no contention, right? All that latency then has to be processed on the other side. Hopefully that server is not being like slash dotted or anything. Then you get the
Mm,
result coming back, and then you have to process it. Like, no wonder it takes so long.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is
So
great.
yeah, definitely worth knowing. And this is an old one, but a good one. Well, there you go. That wraps it up for another episode of Deploy on Friday, Jim. Yeah, make sure you keep track of future episodes. We've got them published every week on our YouTube channel. We're actually making it available as a podcast now, so you can follow along there if you wish. If you don't want to see my ugly mug or Jim's beautiful face, you can go ahead and listen to it without the video. But yeah, feel free to like and subscribe, and we'll see you here next week on Deploy on Friday.